Expert conversations from the world of cybersecurity. It's the Cyber Circuit, powered by Insight Jam.
Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode, the very first of Cyber Circuit. I'm glad you're joining us. This is Insight Jam's home for the human conversation on the intersection between cybersecurity and AI. So we're covering the best practices in cybersecurity. We're talking about where cybersecurity is headed in the not too distant future, maybe distant future. Maybe we get into that. And we've got, of course, opinions and insights from cybersecurity experts from around the globe. Before we get started, of course, this is on YouTube. What kind of host would I be if I did not invite you to like and subscribe? Go right down below, not too far. It should be right there. Hit the thumb, hit the bell. You want to get notified when the next episode is coming out, and they will be coming out. And of course, all of our other great content here on Inside Jam. I invite you to check it out. But enough about that. Let's get on with the show. Please welcome Michael Morgenstern, who will be one of our recurring hosts here. Michael, it's great to have you on.
Good to see you again.
Dayblink Consulting. Michael, let us, since you'll be a recurring face here on the show, what should people be expecting from you? What do you bring to the table, if I can be so rude?
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Why are you here?
I'm here because this is the first time in my 25-year cyber career where the defense side is actually keeping pace for the moment with the offensive side. We've been playing catch up always, and we're now actually talking about how not to play catch up, but to be proactive. That's a super exciting time in technology for me. And I hope we're going to have lots of experts offering lots of ideas on how to be proactive. I say that with a very short and closing window. So this is about as timely as can be. We're having new technologies introduced, new TTPs introduced, new, almost daily. So I'm super excited.
That's great to hear. As somebody who's not a cybersecurity expert, I did not know that. That is exciting. Very excited to hear more about it. And on the show with us, you'll be having a conversation with Josh Ray from Blackwire Labs. Josh, thanks so much for coming on the show and joining us for the first episode.
Michael, Ryan, thanks so much for having me. As I was listening to Michael's intro, it kind of reminded me. So you're saying we've got a chance. That's actually a pretty hopeful message. And it's nice to be able to talk about cybersecurity in the lens of, having a hopeful outlook as far as, what's coming down the road. And I think you're 100% right, Michael. I mean, we do have a window of opportunity here that we as a community, I think, need to try to embrace, especially as we're, related to the topic that we're talking about today.
Awesome. Excellent. So Josh, what's your background in cybersecurity? What angle are you coming at it from?
Yeah. So the CEO and founder here at Blackwire Labs, we're really focused on democratizing cybersecurity skills capability. It comes from my team and I really serving both in the public sector and the commercial sector. Think of that kind of top end part of the pyramid, your Fortune 1000, your large DoD kind of intelligence organizations throughout the course of our careers. And we really feel very passionate, and it's our mission to see how we can actually take that collective expertise and leverage some of this net new technology or newish technology and really distill that down to organizations that can leverage it effectively and make better, faster, more informed, credible decisions across a variety of different types of cybersecurity disciplines. By way of background, started my career in the Navy, did a stint at Naval Intelligence and supported some DoD commands, namely the JTF-GNO, which was the precursor to US Cybercom. Worked at Raytheon, defending Raytheon proper, and spent some time leading iDefense, commercial cyber intelligence organization, and then most recently leading the global cyber defense practice over at Accenture Security.
Awesome. Wow. Quite a resume there, but you've got plenty of stories to tell.
Yeah.
Okay, so stories focusing around, we're talking today about AI augmented decision support. Now, Michael, you know what that is. Josh, you know what that is. Of course, I know what that is. But for everybody else out there who might not know what that is, could you give us a broad, sort of top level overview of the subject?
Yeah, it's a very techy sounding phrase to mean the use of artificial intelligence to enhance human decision making rather than replacing human decision making. So while we go about our daily lives in the current world and in the very near term future, more and more people will be using AI to help them make better decisions.
Okay, that does make sense to me. Of course, I already knew what it was, but now it's making more sense to me. I think I do some of that. In fact, probably down below, if you look at the description and the chaptering, and maybe even at the edit, AI has helped make some of those decisions for me. Uh, so, okay, now we're on board. Now we're getting there. I'm going to turn it over to you, Michael, to get this conversation going because I have exhausted my my expertise in the field. But I'll be back on at the very end. But I'm very much looking forward to hearing the rest of this conversation and where it goes. So, Michael and Josh, take it away.
Thank you, Josh. Great to see you again. We've been bumping into each other a lot lately. Let's talk about how organizations balance the need for AI innovation with security and privacy. I've been thinking a lot lately about the need for speed and the organizational desire for speed that we're all experiencing as everybody brings in ChatGPT or Microsoft or any of the other any of the other technologies that have launched in hyperspeed over the last year, but almost disregarding security, almost disregarding organizational governments, etc. So, how are you seeing organizations balance that?
Yeah, it's really actually pretty interesting, and it kind of varies organization by organization. When you look at, say, large enterprises or even, in the mid-market, there is a huge business imperative to figure out ways to adopt AI in variety of different types of capacities to really accelerate, the things that organizations can do to drive, automation to really extract, I would say, the profitability and the efficiency gains that are there. And every business that we talk to has those mandates, right? I mean, when you get into security, I think there is, obviously a little bit of hesitancy when you think about, because they're the ones that have to be, along with the legal department, right, have to be the ones to kind of unfortunately put the brakes on, net new innovation, right? They typically get the moniker of putting the N and the O in innovation, right? Which causes a level of frustration. But even within those organizations, there's tremendous opportunity. So I think right now folks are taking kind of a cautiously optimistic approach. They want to do it. They want to figure out, how can they do it, in the most kind of risk averse manner. And I think they want to, test out these kind of various different use cases to ensure that, they're doing it in a responsible manner.
I hope you're right. I think you're right. IBM put out last year, early this year, something like that, a survey where it was just north of 80% of respondents said trustworthy AI is essential, but only something like 25 or 24% of generative AI projects have any kind of responsible AI components in governance and secure data management, and that
Yeah.
just makes me say, "Uh-oh." To my earlier comment around like we can seize the moment as a community if we recognize that it's now the moment, right? So like I see this as we don't have these things in place. We know the threats are coming. We're not seeing the attacks in any major volume yet. Let's do something about it.
Right. No, I mean, it's so again, it's the business mandate that comes down, puts the kind of external pressure on these different organizations. They're told, hey, you're going to implement AI in a variety of different capacities, right? people are kind of naturally resistant because they may see it, directly culturally as a threat to maybe how they do their job, or maybe just their job in entirety. But also, you spoke about kind of the technical and kind of governance risks associated with it, which are very real. And I think, one of the things that people have forgotten or have a little bit of kind of this enterprise amnesia is how we have in part kind of overcome some of these things in the past, whether it be journey to cloud. And I'm not saying it's a similar technology. I'm saying that these things are achievable, right? And I think taking very pragmatic types of steps towards kind of driving towards this responsible adoption, because you're never going to completely eliminate the risk out of it, right? I read an article today talking about just hallucinations in AI, and how hallucinations is actually a feature. It's very much akin to creativity, or how somebody exercises their own kind of free will in some respects, right? So that's a good thing. You don't want to just completely beat down a person so that they're, not thinking creatively or not able to exercise their free will. How do we actually kind of understand, this notion of, say, a hallucination, or how the responses are amalgamated? And then how do we actually kind of create some very pragmatic and real guardrails to kind of limit that risk? And I think that's really kind of where we have to get to as a community, because, at the end of the day, we need to be able to do this as, network defenders, and to really counter an adversary that is already leveraging this as part of their, their broader TTPs.
Yeah, so I was thinking, I want to say last week in preparation, that we have relatively lax regulation in the United States, but other than in California. But even in California, Europe has led the way in regulating data management through GDPR, and I'm watching LLMs and other AIs kind of vacuum up data in ways that the models don't necessarily. There's no consciousness of the model, so the model doesn't understand what data it's obtained. Regulators are going to be playing catch up, right? So, back to innovation. Are we innovating? Not that we could slow it down, but are we innovating too fast? Is this going to come bite people with regulation, with legal injunction, etc.?
If history is probably a teacher, I would say at some point, yes, the regulator monster is going to come and try to, clamp down innovation, and maybe even certain areas, rightly so. But I do kind of go back to that idea where it's on the organization themselves, right? It's on the individual, how they're driving kind of that adoption, right? And you're thinking about, when you're scoping a project, whether it's inside cybersecurity or not, thinking about, one, the data that's being leveraged. And I think where we're going to see the most growth and applicability is in kind of these, centers of excellence, these domain centers of excellence, which a lot of the big models are actually trying to engender, right? From a business standpoint, right? They want organizations, they want companies to be able to kind of leverage that infrastructure to create kind of these domain areas of expertise. But then it kind of falls on, how are you training the data, right? How are you curating that information from a, basic regulatory or even just best practices standpoint? Are you demonstrating a level of transparency in sourcing your references? Are you making sure that those references are validated or walk through some type of, source evaluation criteria? Are you using other types of technologies to ensure the security of those sources, that they haven't changed and that they're secure when they're being created? Are you leveraging other types of, combinations of technology, like, entity extraction, to ensure that, that information that's coming in is mapped to specific industry frameworks, right? Are you helping people ask better questions that drive optimal outputs as well? I mean, these are some of the things that, that we have done, again, and things that kind of remain within, our sphere of control, to really help drive, a level of transparency and explainability and kind of the outputs that we're providing. And again, they're very kind of common sense, pragmatic types of approach that, really, I think any organization, when they're kind of entering into a transformation project for AI, more specifically within security, should take a hard look at.
Want more Inside Jam? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for shorts, panels, podcasts, and more. In your shorts feed, enjoy a daily dose of best practices from tech experts and leading solution providers, while long-form panel discussions and keynotes, recorded live every quarter, go deep on important industry topics. And don't miss our collection of regular podcasts, keeping you informed on the latest trends. We're hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so subscribe to be notified of our next upload. Now, let's get back to the show.
You've got a Navy background, so maybe you'll smile. I want to talk about AI assistance within decision making. Augmenting human decision making, which is where I see the very near term, the most near term, most amount of benefit. Right. So there's lots of benefits in the long term, and long is compressing very quickly. But right now we have tremendous benefits in helping make better decisions across all sorts of disciplines. So I think about how much faster we're able to execute the OODA loop, right, with AI. And without getting too militaristic here, right? I mean, this is what pilots have been doing as we've been adding technology, more and more technology into the cockpit, right, in order to enable them to execute faster. And I think that's a really apt metaphor for what maybe all of humankind or most of humankind is going to be able to do with AI now. I mean, in the next 6 months. As people start hopefully our viewership is already, they're tuning in because you're all thinking about this already. So I thought maybe it'd be useful to talk about, both the benefits and the limitations, not limitations like you're not going to do it. We're not putting the genie back in the bottle, but limitations in the sense that, maybe these are risks that we need to consider as we go. But I'm an optimist. So let's start with benefits, right? I've got a couple, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of these, I think, are very tangible in nature, right? So you mentioned time savings, right? You mentioned the ability to direct cost, benefit. Like, so, we've had clients where, we've seen up to 50%, maybe even more, time savings and being able to create, end product deliverables. I would say the other things that's more specific are being able to get access to skill sets that an organization may not have, on staff, or even be, compelled to maybe go out to market in some instances to have to get some of those, especially when you're talking about state and local governments or kind of mid-markets where they just don't necessarily have the budget to do some of those, things specifically. I would say that, there's a huge opportunity for folks to kind of operate outside of their core, one, maybe two skill sets that they've kind of continued to build their career in. There's a use case that, I like where, we had a small health tech company down here in Florida, who was experiencing a business email compromise attack. And I liked the use case because it was very much a hands-on, very technical CTO, but he had no real security staff, had a few developers, had a few IT folks. They got flooded with, one of their users got flooded with thousands of emails. And initially he went to ChatGPT because he thought it was an IT misconfiguration. And then when he found out that it was a problem that, he leveraged Blackwire to help him solve this. But what was really cool was he was able to kind of dialogue back and forth, right? And he was able to understand not only the complexity of the problem, but it was able to walk him kind of very much in a crisis management incident response kind of approach through the process. And he said, well, should I delete the emails? And they're like, no, don't delete the emails. And Blackwire is like, because it's going to halfway through it, you're going to be able to see where they're doing the account takeover and so on and so forth. And what was really just kind of reassuring and hopeful for us is that, he was able to identify the problem, drive some level of remediation, and then have the employee contact the bank before the funds were actually transferred over to the cyber criminal in less than 4 hours, which is for me like a pretty amazing thing, because like we've been doing this for 25 plus years, right? And like to be able to see somebody have that level of empowerment, really does, give me hope that, this is a technology that can really help, organizations, especially again in that mid-market, have a fighting chance. Another one I like to kind of point to is, the use of tabletop exercises. And I'm sure, we can dig into this more, but, this is something that every organization has to do, right? It's a very much a compliance mandate, to do these tabletop exercises. And unfortunately, these things are, you kind of get put on the shelf when they're done and say, hey, that was great. Here's all the things that we should do to be better, but they're not directly implemented into the security program or to create a kind of a more resilient posture. And they cost a lot of money, and they typically take, 5 or 6 different types of people with different types of disciplines to really kind of create both the threat profile, the different types of scenarios, the different injects, to run the actual exercise themselves, to, create the out brief. And it's, over the course of maybe, 2 to 3 months. And now we're able to help organizations do these, and actually drive, realistic, very highly detailed, not only threat scenarios, but very much kind of customized to their industry, customized to their organization, specific parts of their organization that they want to measure and drive. And, we're creating these things in less than an hour, and helping organizations kind of, drive this. We had one, systems integrator that leveraged the platform, on BD dollars, and you'll appreciate this. I mean, for, a large, enterprise organization, he was able to do it with one other person and create all the content in less than 15 hours. Right. So, I mean, like those are the types of exponential growth. Matt DeVoe talks about this notion of we're in this kind of era of exponential growth now with AI, where we're really kind of challenged by how do we actually extend our expertise to help ask people the right questions, know what good output really looks like, but then also that kind of order of magnitude. How to actually leverage creativity now, to solve bigger, more impactful types of problems for the organization.
We've seen the very beginnings of helping remove the noise so that people kind of in the SOC, kind of people in IR, et cetera, are seeing more signal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And or where we've seen them manifest, if we take a super simple example like phishing, right? For the last 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 years, organizations have gotten better and better at flagging to users warnings that a particular email might be might be a phish, even if it made it all through all of their filters, right? We've gotten good at that, and some of that's been machine learning. I won't say that's all AI kind of
Right.
yet. Um, but we're starting to see examples. I have a couple use cases actually in production where we're detecting the phishing and then we're responding to the SOC analyst, so that the SOC analyst can block like in advance so that you no longer need to go hope that the user read your warning, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, even that has been around for a year or two, but now with actual AI, we're getting better and better at essentially only needing to involve the SOC analyst when something is kind of in the gray zone, in the threshold. And to me, that's a great example of this augmented decision making, right? Because now the AI can essentially say, "I'm not sure." Right? This looks like something. Let me get a human in the loop to make the final decision. Or the AI can say, I'm absolutely sure, or at least as sure as any human would be, if not more. So I can take the decision, and then if I'm wrong, you can come back and fix it later. So I like use cases like that, though I also, and we'll come to this in a little while, I see a lot of risk associated with that. You have any others? I mean, like where else are we going to see this in the cyber world, or
Yeah,
soon?
so there's always been an issue in being a intel analyst way back when, kind of operationalizing intelligence effectively, right? Like, so, we've always traditionally looked at how do you operationalize intelligence and get it into a machine readable format and make sure that SOC operators can kind of detect or tooling can detect things more effectively and kind of drive playbooks and so on and so forth. Threat hunts, huge opportunities, I think, there. But I also think it allows for kind of a leveling up of both personnel and the intelligence itself, right? So, I think a former colleague of mine, Rich Barger, back in the day said, nobody can rub a PDF on a firewall or a SIM and make magic, right? You've got to figure out how to actually, if you're an intelligence analyst, make your intel applicable to a wide variety of different type of stakeholders. And have spent over the last 10 or 15 years a tremendous amount of time trying to focus that on threat operations. Now you can take, advisories from CISA or an ISAC or, a well created, intel report from a vendor or even internally created stuff and apply it, to a wide variety of different types of tactical, operational, and strategic stakeholders, right? So, with some well-crafted prompts, we've been able to say, okay, now based on my technology stack, write me, YAR signatures for, to support threat hunting or a variety of different types of, maybe it's a Splunk signature or CrowdStrike signature or Microsoft or whatever, to, fully kind of tactically help operationalize that. But then, that operator, whether they're, a SOC operator or not, can really start to think of kind of in more of that tier 2 or tier 3 kind of realm and say, okay, well, how is this now going to impact my, CIS controls? Or how should I, update or augment my, incident response policy based on, this new intelligence or how this ransomware actor is operating? What are some of the strategic implications I need to be thinking about based on, how this threat is targeting my industry or potentially supply chain? And what do I need to do from, a broader, indications and warning standpoint? So there's a huge opportunity, I think, for intelligence analysts and folks that kind of operate in that kind of operational and strategic sphere to think about and leverage intelligence in some more, creative ways and make it very applicable to a wide variety of different types of stakeholders, in the governance and risk areas as well, outside of that kind of traditional threat operations set of stakeholders.
Yeah, let me see if I can underline all of the categories that you just
Yeah,
answered.
sorry about
You
that.
just no, it was great. You can answer the questions. I heard you say better decision quality. I heard you say improved efficiency. You ended with better risk management. I heard you say better innovation. So the only one that's on my mind that I didn't hear you say, so good job, was bias. And I don't actually know. One day I wake up on one side of the bed and I think, oh man, we're going to be able to reduce bias tremendously. And the next day I wake up on the other side of the bed and I think, oh man, we're introducing a lot of bias. So what do you think?
Yeah, no, that's I mean, I can talk about some approaches that we're taking, so, one of the things that we started first is saying, okay, it all starts kind of with good, clean, highly vetted data, right? So I think, we worked to set up a community of, or, folks that are been doing this in their professional life for a long time and across multiple different types of industries and roles. And you need that kind of third party view to help kind of say, okay, this is an expert source or a highly vetted source or not, as well as kind of our own kind of curation as well. We created a source evaluation criteria and I would encourage, organizations to really think about, to your point around data governance, how are they actually, kind of vetting and rating, high quality sources of data versus, kind of chaff or stuff that, you don't want to use to help make a decision, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that's out there. So it kind of starts with that data set and it starts with that human oversight to help inform that first and foremost. And then I think kind of that ongoing kind of evaluation criteria that you're using, Ravi Gupta, who's our VP of engineering, has been doing this for a really long time. And, we have a set of different frameworks, or different industry frameworks that we actually now run all of our data set through for entity extraction, right? To make sure that it's kind of mapped into, whether it be MITRE ATT&CK or NIST cybersecurity framework, 2.0 or whatever, so that that information is also kind of tagged as well and aligned to those industry frameworks. And then we kind of walk it down another layer. And then we think about, okay, we really want to continue to, eliminate as much bias as we can without kind of destroying the creativity of the model itself as well. So where's that kind of soft spot around kind of where do you ratchet creativity down to, right? And that's a continuously, test and repeat. You talked about the OODA, loop before, continuously having to do that. And making sure that you have a corpus of a community that can kind of give you that type of feedback. And then being transparent, right? Like, we grew up, whether it be in school or in college or, in the military or whoever, like citing your sources. Like, well, how do you being challenged? Like, how do you know that, right? How did you come about that answer? What were the sources that we're using to do that? And I think that it's, that also helps when you're thinking about kind of the broader regulatory or, potentially copyright things, citing your sources effectively, right? And being able to show that level of transparency. And then we've taken it kind of a step further and kind of introduced, some technology to kind of instantiate those sources on the blockchain to make sure that they're, secure, and that there's a, kind of an audit trail associated with those as well too. But it's a multi-factored approach to kind of eliminate bias or reduce the bias, because I don't think you're going to be able to eliminate it, completely. And then making sure you're also helping people ask better questions as well, right? I mean, we want to take out the friction of having to be a great prompt engineer all the time, although that's a skill set that I think that most people really should be learning in order to get a good response. So how can we help engender that? So those are all, I think, again, very practical and pragmatic approaches to at least trying to eliminate or reduce the risk of bias, which also kind of engenders a level of confidence. And then, maybe having a rule set to say, hey, if it's outside of your knowledge base, or if it's outside of this kind of domain genre, maybe have the LLM come back and say, like a human would be like, I don't know, like I can't answer that question, right? I mean, that's something that we do quite a bit. And our clients, really like that. So, these are just some things that, we've taken a hard look. Everybody talks about, trust, and everybody talks about, these kind of big words and kind of arm waving type of things. But I think you're going to have to really, every organization is going to really have to take a hard look and say, okay, like what are the tangible things that, make up something to be trusted, and how is that going to actually drive adoption in the organization?
You hit most of the items that I kind of try to keep front of mind for kind of limitations around. So I'll recap, right? You hit sources, and I think this is a huge problem, mostly because the way that organizations are getting the most utility out of their AIs is enabling those AIs to access everything, right? And I've mentioned this before, right? We're starting to see some U.S. banks create walled gardens, but even within that walled garden, right, the access that these things have is scarily incredible, right? Because that's what makes them function the best, right? So
Yeah.
this is going to be a new security tension, right?
Mhm.
I heard you said traceability. I like that. Usually, I think about it as explainability. Though they're not exactly perfectly the same, but they overlap. They overlap a lot, right? If you can't prove where the data came from, and how you got it, and why you should believe it, and why it's trustworthy, then why would anybody believe the decision? What about ethics? What about like how a human might interpret something versus how the AI might interpret
Mm.
something, particularly around, privacy? Like, how do we teach an AI to make ethical judgments around what should be private and what shouldn't? Like, it feels like the current approach is all rule based. This is not allowed. This is not allowed. This is not allowed, and therefore everything else is allowed.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably answer that with a question. I would say, how do you teach humans to do that
Oh,
first,
fair enough.
right? Because I mean, I think we struggle with that culturally and legally as well, as far as what's fair use versus not fair use. What's regulated in this country is not regulated in that country, right? To be able to have that kind of broader Rosetta Stone, right? And I think presenting, this is where the presentation layer I think is important, right? To be able to present the view, right? And to kind of go back to like old school kind of intelligence tradecraft, right? Where you're presenting all of the information to the user or the human, right? To make the decision. This is what happens in the UK, and this is how it is in Japan, and this is how it is here in the US. Here's the problem that you're trying to solve. Based on all of this information, here are maybe 5 recommendations of how you should approach it. So when we go back to kind of augmented decision making, it's not necessarily saying like the AI has to have the ethics, right? It's basically saying, can the AI provide you with a view so that the human can actually exercise that level of ethics and decision making to make the best decision that's in line with the policies and the ethos of the organization for which they operate in. And I think we've pivoted so far that we're saying, okay, like we want to reduce human interaction, or having the human have to do so many different types of things. But at some point, we still have to make decisions, right? We still have to be able to like leverage this, even if we're leveraging it as a digital employee, we still have to govern and we still have to manage it effectively. And I think some of the people that are the best leaders and the best managers are the best mentors. The things that they do to actually help get the most out of sometimes their employees, I found, are some of the best users and early adopters of AI, especially in security, because they're very focused on what is the outcome that I need to achieve, and then how do I kind of decompartmentalize that problem into specific types of tasks or questions that then I can kind of drive towards that outcome.
Unlock better leads through Solutions Review events.
Welcome to Data Demo Day. Expert Roundtable, Solution Spotlight featuring Monte Carlo, Cohesity, Denodo, Cloudflare, High Gear, Broadcom, NextThing.
Boost your brand with a webinar that shares comprehensive use cases, real-time product demos, and an interactive Q&A. All broadcast live to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Zoom from our Boston studio, or even on location. Fill your sales funnel with high-quality targeted leads. And contact us today by visiting solutionsreview.com/virtual events.
Let me switch gears. Let's go kind of to the tangible and practical, right? Most of our clients have been experimenting, trying POCs here, mostly uncoordinated, kind of across the enterprise. A leader decides they should try it. Somebody adds AI to what the next version of whatever tool they're using that includes AI, and now starts to run a POC. Feels to me like we're still walking up the peak of inflated expectations, right? Are you seeing anything different? Are you seeing the same? Kind of add your sample to my sample, neither of which are statistically significant.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, we try to, whenever we engage in a proof of concept with a client, really trying to make sure that we're outlining, what success looks like, right? I mean, our clients get bombarded with, thousands of these types of things, right? You don't want to be just another, tool that they have to look at every month or so. And, for us, we're like, okay, if that's the way your mindset is right now, it's probably not a good time to engage it. But like, if you engage and you say, here's the criteria, like here, are we going to, at the end of this 30-day trial, or at the end of this kind of proof of concept, right? Are you, have you seen that you've improved efficiency? Have you been able to kind of operate outside of your core areas of expertise and do things that otherwise you wouldn't have been able to do, right? Have you found that, specific things like, the output and the sources are, allow you to drive at least an 85%, answer, right? And if you kind of balance it as far as how you would say interview bringing in a new person onto the team, right? And start to kind of make those, similar types of, how would you judge or how would you evaluate a new employee on your team, right? And how would you kind of, lay out that success criteria? Because I think traditionally organizations are not great at this anyways when they do new employee onboarding, and they kind of like, okay, here's your job, go do it. And then, they're not going to give them that kind of step-by-step kind of mentoring. So I think you have to kind of approach it in that way, right? You have to really have a strong set of kind of success criteria for what you want this to do. And then you have to be thinking about, maybe a little bit more broadly outside of your team, like who else in the organization can kind of benefit from some of these things as well too, right? Probably difficult, from you when you're kind of driving kind of broader transformational types of engagements, right? Because you're looking at how do you really kind of optimize maybe somebody's security operations capability, right? And they're looking at it through a particular type of lens, and getting these organizations, or groups to kind of talk in and of themselves is difficult. Never mind introducing something that could completely disrupt the whole workflow of how people do. And most people like to be able to come in. They know they have their 10 sets of things that they have to do every single morning or in the afternoon, and they do those 10 things. And if they check those boxes, they feel like they've accomplished something, right? And AI disrupts that. AI significantly kind of, says, okay, now you only have to do 4 of those things, right? These other things you just have to manage. And, the remaining 3 or 4, you've got to think about how you could potentially do them better, Not everybody really likes that, so it's a cultural shift as well for a lot of folks.
Yeah, it gets me excited because I like making change in those organizations and kind of moving all of the things that don't matter out of the queue to be able to focus on the things that do matter. So I'm super excited. We're already seeing some benefits both at our clients internally, at our firm, etc. Let's close off by talking about risks and threats. So, we've mentioned a couple, and I don't just mean, how to attack an AI. In fact, I don't mean how to attack an AI. I mean, what are the risks and threats of this new world that we're facing? Every week we see the mass unemployment is coming, but what else is there?
I think the unemployment piece is concerning, right? Because I'm not saying that, in some respects, AI, especially in security, right? So I'll kind of frame the conversation specifically for security and broader risk. I think one of the risks is that people will see it as an external threat and not see it as an opportunity, right? I think that's kind of first and foremost, like this notion of this thing is going to take my job, right? Because on the surface, when you do certain things, you're just like, oh, this thing just did what I typically take a week to do, and it did it in 30 seconds, right? Like, okay, now what am I going to do? I think it's a challenge to some folks, and I think sometimes people don't want to be challenged necessarily in their jobs. I think the risk is that people don't see this as a new technology that they should kind of think about how does it work? How do I actually use this to be more effective? Because I think it's going to be a step increase. The people that can do that, the people that can kind of get over that mental hurdle of like learning how to leverage this effectively and placing their own kind of external, internal guardrails on, yes, I have to evaluate the output. Yes, I have to make sure that we're kind of doing all the things that we talked about before to kind of reduce that risk. Those people are going to be like the leaders and the folks that are going to excel kind of in the next, probably 2 to, 100 years, right? In security, right? They can make that kind of intellectual and emotional leap, I would say. So the risk is really like a cultural one in my mind, right? They're going to see this as something that is an external threat to how they do their job, maybe to their job broadly, and they're not kind of willing to say, like, I need to figure out how to leverage this technology to be to be better, right? And what we're trying to kind of coach clients on specifically is, like, your expertise is something that is incredibly valuable in helping to understand what are the right questions to ask. And then on the other side, what's the right data set that I should be using to answer that question? And then what does good output kind of look like? And then all the steps in between, as I mentioned before, about compartmentalizing that. If people can really kind of think about how they do their jobs in those terms, they're going to be really successful, I think, moving forward.
I teed you up to answer the 30,000 foot question. I'll answer the 5 foot side of that. OWASP is soon to be publishing their top 10 agentic AI threats. I'm helping draft it, so I'm privy to some of the issues that made the list. Two of them seem particularly relevant to the chat that we've been having. The first one is kind of blast radius around your agents, and the second one is goal and instruction manipulation. Essentially, we've got problems limiting scope of AI actions, right? And we have problems. You just started to allude to this. Ensuring that the instructions, the data involved in that the AI is relying on, aren't manipulated. As we turn more and more to agents and chatbots and for decision support, how are we going to be sure that we can trust the responses and the actions? You want to take us to the end with a parting thought?
Yeah. Vet the data, right? Making sure that, specifically it's a highly, highly, highly vetted data source that you're starting with, and start small and expand. And then have a criteria that you're kind of focused on organizationally of how you evaluate what goes in to kind of that knowledge base or training set. And then making sure, again, that your outputs are at least referenceable from that standpoint, right? So that when the response comes back, you can at least trace it back, and that's a starting point, right? And then limiting the access you mentioned before, I think is incredibly important. Like, I don't think it needs to have access to everything, right? It needs access to the things that it needs to do its job. And then even so, maybe some specifically crafted prompts that only allow to make a call to that particular API or whatever based on, the instruction set that's given, right? So you're starting kind of small and starting to expand, out from there. And those, I think, I can't wait for that report to come out. I think it's going to be outstanding. It makes me feel good that you're one of the evaluators too, because that's an outstanding organization.
Yeah, excellent conversation, guys. That
Right.
was fascinating to listen to, honestly. And like I said, not being a cybersecurity practitioner, I felt there was still plenty for me to take away from that. Josh, the one thing that stood out to me that you mentioned was the sort of automation aspect of everyday jobs that AI brings. And is okay, yeah, I come in and I do these 10 things, and now AI can do them in an hour. Something I've run into just from a video editing aspect using AI tools is now I don't have that menial crawling through footage, going through, okay, which is both a good and a bad thing for my, I don't get that sort of, I have intimate knowledge of all of my assets here, and going through and doing those menial tasks. I don't make those same discoveries the way I used to. But at the same time, I've now freed my mind up to work on, higher level things, or make different decisions than I did. So it's like you said, it is kind of almost like a rewiring of my process.
Have you asked those questions though? Have you gone back though, and like through the process of, the discovery and kind of, I know what you're talking about. You kind of lose touch with the actual data or telemetry, and you feel like a level removed. Right,
Yeah. You
from
feel
that
more like a
piece.
manager. Yeah.
But going back and actually asking those questions, and to be able to say, hey, I've noticed, and when I've done this in the past, was there any trending across, latency or any other types of things, that was noticed, and, provide me a readout of, of those learnings or something like that. So, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think, yes, it's freeing us to kind of think on order of magnitude, higher level types of things, but it still provides you the opportunity to go back and interrogate the data in different types of ways, without having to necessarily kind of go through step by step and do that.
Yeah.
Um,
Like you said,
so
still
maybe just
being able to
something
go
about-
and cite and check sources, things like that.
And that's your expertise,
Yeah.
though. That's your expertise from being a practitioner and having done this your whole life and knowing that these things exist so that you can then kind of go back and do a QA and check the AI as far as saying, like, did you look at this? Did you think about this? Or if you found this, please provide me with instances or where this is, has occurred. And that's the same type of, this is what I'm talking about as far as elevating that level of expertise to be able to ask the right questions, and do that in a more kind of formulaic way.
Though I will caution you, Ryan, we've been out in front of clients and publicly now showing just how easy it is to poison the LLM data sets, so that when you actually go and fact check, the data that you're fact checking against is wrong also, right? And data integrity is just shot. So we're entering a brave new world.
Yeah. Trust but verify with a capital V, I guess, like really verify. Well, excellent conversation, guys. Like I said, it was a blast to listen to. So if people listen to this and enjoyed it, which I assume you did because you're hearing me say these words at the end of the show, you're still around. If you haven't done so, please go down, like and subscribe. You want to know when the next one's coming out, which will be soon, probably in 2 weeks. Michael, if people are interested in learning more about you and what you do, where should they go and look?
Sure. Our boutique firm is called Dabling Consulting, www.dablingconsulting.com.
Excellent. Asked and answered. Josh, how about you? Where should people go to find out what you're doing?
Yeah, they can check us out at www.blackwirelabs.com and or just DM me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to engage.
Excellent. So all that information will be right down there in the show notes. So once you've clicked those links, open those tabs up, get in touch with these guys, because I think you're gonna want to be involved with them in the future. So with that, come back and join us for the next episode of Cyber Circuit. We'll see you then.
Powered by Insight Jam.